Hi there, I hope all is well. I wanted to share an idea about Parshas Chaye. If you notice, the Parsha opens with the death of Sarah Imenu, Avram Avinu's wife. My rabbi, Rabbi Reuven Tarragon, likes to point out that when we read the Torah, sometimes, based on the way we read it in shul, we don't fully appreciate the context and positioning of stories in the Torah. If you look at the end of last week's Parsha, Parshas Vayera, you'll see that Akedas Yitzchak was the end of the Parsha, the last story in the Parsha. That's the story of the binding of Isaac, where Avram Avinu faced his most difficult and trying test of being asked to sacrifice his one and only son, the promise of his future. Obviously, this task is overwhelming, but Avram Avinu passes. Yet, in comes our story of Parashat Chaye. The next scene that we see in the Torah, that Avram Avinu comes home to his wife who has passed away. Now, there's no commercial break in the Torah. This is precisely the next thing that happens to Avram Avinu, which is very difficult. Here he is, someone who just passed the most difficult test of his life, and his reward, after following the ways of God, as he comes home to his most beloved person in the entire world, passed away. This is certainly not the reward he was expecting. It's tragic for him. Now, what can a person in such a circumstance do? He has two options. He can fold under the crippling difficulties and sadness of having a deceased wife, or he can be inspired by the life of his wife, Sarah. We see that's precisely what Avram Avinu is. How do we know that? If you look at the exact next story, after Avram Avinu finds a burial for Sarah, we see that he sends his servant Eliezer to look for a wife for his son Yitzchak. We see that even though Avram Avinu had such a dear, loving relationship with his wife Sarah, and it ended so abruptly and surprisingly, he still decided that, I know it ended, but I loved Sarah so much. She was such a treasure of mine. I want to pass this on to my son. It's better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all. Avram Avinu recognizes the significance of life in the face of death. That's something that's so important for all of us to realize, not just in the realm of life and death, but any experiences that we go through. There are going to be ups and downs. We know the common phrase that people say is that everything good comes to an end. It's true, things may come to an end, but that doesn't mean that you should never begin them and set out on that journey. I believe the lesson we can learn from Avram Avinu is as follows. We should fully appreciate the journeys in our life, even though they come to end, and live them to their fullest. And at the same time, when our journeys come to an end, we should do our best to pass on our experiences and things we've learned to our loved ones, people around us, into the next generation. Hope you have a good Shabbos.